So if you remember in our discussions, I shared certain videos where I was showing somebody throwing stone into the pond and wave is getting formed, and we had some small award question that is given that velocity of that wave is root gy, can you determine depth of the pond? And you told it was something around 1.635 meter, if I remember correctly, right? But the point is that that day you were awestruck. Oh, how we can use a stone and determine what is the velocity that particular pond is having. Then we also took an example of the waterfall where you again sent a video. And when I asked you that what would happen if you throw a stone in there, you almost said that the velocity of water is so high that that ripple would not be even visible, right? So we agree up to here. If yes, what as an engineer, we always we have this habit of quantifying things. So how we can put that pond water and the waterfall into one single number? So that would mean that we have to use something like speed of waves and relate it to Froude number to quantify the behavior of open channel flow. And by now we know that lot of behavior or lot of flow properties of open channel flow, it would depend if our flow is fast or slow, because typically we say that subcritical flow is slow and supercritical flow is fast. Now the key distinction would come is that a slow flow, it would have time to gradually adjust to changes downstream. Something is flowing very slowly, steadily. It knows I have to adjust to new strata or new bed in next 500 meters. You have time. It will adjust to it gradually, right? And we will call it as a gradually varied flow, which would be topic of discussion into our next module also. However, when something is flowing fast and it suddenly encounter changes in bed properties, for example, it encounters certain bump that it has to climb, it encounters, it is flowing fast, it encounters a different flow velocity downstream, it is already flowing fast, distance would be covered in a speedy manner, it would have less time as compared to our slow flow to adjust to all these changes, right? And then there is a probability some rapidity will happen, some rapidness will get encapsulated into the flow, and we call such situations as rapidly varied flow, and hydraulic jump is one example. I emphasized in my last video that hydraulic jump will only form when a supercritical flow flowing at fast velocity tries to join a subcritical flow over a shorter distance. And we learned that hydraulic jump is very different from simple subcritical flow, because some losses of energy will happen in form of eddies, in form of heat that is getting generated and so on. Does it make sense? Now, when we deal with engineering structures, we are building a bridge, for example, on a river. As I mentioned that as an engineer, you would want to minimize the cost while serving the purpose. So we also took an example of Howrah Bridge, which spans hundreds of meters. And I said that if you have an option, you can reduce width of that river by doing some soiling work, because putting soil would be definitely cheaper than putting steel in the bridge, right? So we agreed that yes, we can reduce span of the river. But question is how much we can reduce span of the river so that we are not affecting the conditions upstream. right? Or the construction is, or the upstream is downstream invariant. Invariant means I don't care what is happening downstream. I am happy, you do whatever you want to do, but if I get bothered, I can induce flooding in upstream, right? So if rivers are humans, that's the kind of conversation they will have with us. Does it make sense so far? So if this makes sense, we will try to determine what are the conditions, what is the wave velocity, why you were able to see that stone creating ripples in the pond, and you the same stone thrown by same person exactly at the same velocity would not create any effect at all in a waterfall. We have to quantify that, and that will give us an entry point how I determine how much I should reduce my river width to get answers to that questions. So it would be fairly easy if you listen carefully. What I am going to do, I am going to take a channel section which is horizontal. Again, for derivation, I am going to take the simplest section so that lessons can generalize as we can add complexity to it. There is one gate here. This is channel gate here, and we have some water in this channel. Make sense so far? We take this as a control volume, and initially we assume that this water is not flowing. It is at standstill. Not hard to imagine. Now what we do, we give this gate a sudden movement. We just shook this gate. We just opened this gate. Whatever we did something so that a wave is created. That's how you were creating ripples in water, by throwing something, creating some perturbation, right? So you say that, yeah, let me create some ripple here. So what will happen? One body wave will produce, which will travel at some velocity, let us say delta V, through the media, right? And a surface wave will also be created, which will have a different velocity as compared to the fluid that is flowing underneath. Remember, it's all, in all layers, everything will not flow at the same velocity. So a ripple may look something like this, which is traveling at some velocity c. Now, when you throw a stone into the pond, you see that certain ripples are created which have some protrusions above the surface, some depth of flow just above the surface. If you throw a stone, let the ripples produce, and take a snapshot and try to draw a horizontal plane, taking everything in excess, you will see some delta y that that wave has produced. No doubt about that. So can we say that the depth would be delta y? Some delta y increment will happen as the wave is moving in whatever direction. Our original depth happened to be y. This happened to be y. And now the problem that this wave is going to induce is that it will destroy the steadiness. Everything was at standstill across each cross section. Nothing was varying with respect to time. But now as that wave is moving, the steadiness, the tranquility of that system is disturbed. Does it make sense? Now, what we have to do, we are interested to apply Reynolds transportation for sure. But you know that term in Reynolds transportation theorem where we do del upon del t in first term. So you have summation of something, that rate change of extensive properties with respect to time on left hand side. Then first time is rate change in control volume, and second change is surface fluxes. There are only three terms. We always try to avoid, whenever we are dealing these simplistic derivations, the rate change with respect to time. But in this case, that would be problematic because something is changing with respect to time within control volume. Control volume, because of that delta y, some mass will flow out of that system. I am not very keen to go towards non-steady state. What I can do, I can use my understanding of physics, I can use understanding of motion and say that let me ride this wave. I will sit on this wave and watch this system from there. Not very difficult. You have learned about pseudo forces, pseudo velocities, right? What we will do here, okay, I will sit with here, but to account for that, I should have minus c here then. I should have c here because now I'm observing everything with respect to the wave. Does it make sense? Why we are doing this? Now, as soon as we change our frame of reference to wave, what is the wave velocity? 0, because you are riding on that wave. Now from absolute frame, we are coming to the relative frame. And we are just doing it to make our analysis easier. And that's exactly what we used to do. You are in a lift going upwards, then somebody asks you what is the velocity or what is the force acting. Pseudo force was your answer. And here we are also changing frame of reference, right? So we can say that not pseudo force, we don't really need pseudo forces here, but we can say that we can use that concept of relative velocity that we learned and apply it here. Does it make sense? Then again, we will go to our two formulations. One would be conservation of mass, because now this system would appear as a steady, that your now control volume is moving with the velocity, with the wave. That's what it means. You have made your coordinate axis moving rather than keeping them stationary. So nothing will change in control volume itself, right? So you are riding a car and then somebody asks you that how, at what speed everybody is moving in your car, you will say 0, right? But if somebody is watching from outside, he will say, oh, there were 5 people just a minute ago, this car passed, that means 5 people are gone out of the system, right? That's what exactly what we are saying, is that rate change of any property with respect to time is going to be 0 for that extensive property. So our conservation of mass simply reduces to summation of VA equal to 0, because left hand side would be 0, rate change of time in our Reynolds transportation will be 0. So all we will have is V1A1 equal to V2A2 kind of thing. Does it make sense? And keeping our sign convention, inflows would be negative, outflows would be positive. Again, going back to derivation of Reynolds transportation theorem, and I always emphasize velocity vector here, area vector here, sign should be opposite for inflows, velocity vector, area vector, same sign, same direction. All right. So now what I will do here, what is the inflow area? Isn't it y plus delta y times b? If b is my width of cross section, I am talking about rectangular channels as of now. My inflow velocity here is equal to C minus delta V. It is delta V minus C, and I say that if it is incoming, it would be multiplied by -1. So I can write it as C minus delta V, right? My outflow velocity is minus C. If you go to this diagram, it is minus C, right? It is in the backward direction after applying that correction for frame. So I can simply write this as minus C, because this is outflow, minus C multiply by y multiply by b equal to 0. Not rocket science. Can I say that delta v is equal to c delta y divided by y plus delta y? Just simplifying it. And let me put this in box. Can I say this my as equation number 1? Kuch nahi kiya, I've just simplified the terms. So far so good. Stop me anytime if you have questions. Stop me anytime. Right? if I've done mistake, just let me know, because I'm trying to derive these in real time. So there are chances I could also stumble upon some errors. Now let us go to our second condition. Whenever I have spoken about what is our objective first, our objective is to find what is the relationship between depth of flow and wave velocity. C equal to root of gy, right? That's what I gave in the question, over which Aman also won some prize and Yashi won some ink pot, right? That was the question. So we are deriving the same relationship. So this has not given me anything. I have just found delta V, and that is the velocity that would be propagating through the fluid medium. I have not even talked about C, the wave velocity. So I will use my other equation, which is we call as momentum equation. And always remember, momentum equation says that summation of forces through body and summation of forces on surface, so should be equal to del upon del t v rho dv plus this is over control volume, this is over control surface, rho v dA, since this is force, our beta is equal to del b upon del m and del capital B upon m, and hence it becomes velocity. So this becomes our expression for force for Reynolds transportation theorem, right? Any doubt here? We have already assumed that this is a steady system by applying that pseudo conversions, or by applying using this concept of relative velocity. There is nothing pseudo there, it's just a relative velocity, right? Frame, we have just changed the frame of reference. Now we have assumed that our channel is horizontal. We have not assumed any slope. That would mean that weight component in horizontal direction is going to be zero, because it is always weight into sine theta into the horizontal direction. So we can ignore this term for this derivation where channel bed is horizontal. But we are left with surface forces. So surface forces are essentially coming from hydrostatic pressure distribution, if you remember. On one side, we have height of y plus delta y. On another side, you have height of just y. Can I say that magnitude of F acting on this surface A is equal to half into rho g into h square? यही लिखते थे ना? And if width is known, it would be multiplied by B, the total force. It is pressure multiplied by area. Any doubt here so far? If not, can I say that this is half into rho into g y plus delta y square into b? And of course, 2 is been taken care of. Make sense? Can I say that force at section B, that is at the end of our surface, is half into rho into g into y square into b? So far, so good. I have reduced this term to 0, but I have to still focus on this term. So let me write it here. So this is my cross section V rho VDA. So at section 1, can I write this as my velocity is negative or positive? What is my velocity in x-axis, x direction?
Positive.
No, what is the magnitude? So here,
Delta V minus.
delta V minus C. Delta V minus C, right? Multiply by rho. I am just writing these terms for for the control surface at 1. Velocity is known as delta V minus C. Rho is rho. then delta V minus C would come again, then multiply by area, which is y plus delta y into B. Does it make sense? Since all of these are entering fluxes, this has to be have a sign of negative as per our convention. So this is happening at this section. I'm applying this term of beta rho VDA here. Since we are dealing with a continuum with a discretized system, we can replace this integral by summation beta rho velocity times area at that section. Inflow is negative, outflows would be positive. So this is at inflow. Similarly, outflow would be given by our velocity of flow is c, negative sign. It is in backward direction. Rho, and again this would be multiplied by minus c yb. Right? So this would have a positive sign because it is outflux, and we will adjust for these negative signs later on. Does it make sense? Pay attention to this very carefully. Any doubt, any question, any confusion, please let me know. Can you simplify this first of all? Simplify this and let me know what is the end expression you are getting. There would be certain terms that may cancel out. Can you just simplify this quickly? That is, we can write this as delta V minus C square multiply, but minus sign outside. Rho is here, y plus delta y is here, b is here. You can simplify it to some extent. Minus c square is here, rho yb is here.
Sir, there should be delta V instead of delta Y.
Delta b?
Like delta V square plus C square minus 2 delta VC. And at second stage also you like, formula.
This is correct, right? This is correct. Where I've done mistake at 1, 2 or 3?
Sir, 2. Like delta V square plus C square minus 2 delta V.
Okay. Oh, yes, yes. Thank you. That's why I was wondering why certain terms are not falling in place. This is delta VC. That's okay. Perfect. What we will do, we will equate this to our body forces, right? So our body forces that we calculated, because that's what we do. Summation of forces is equal to terms on the other side of Reynolds transportation theorem. So our body forces in this case are half of rho g y plus delta y square into b minus half of rho g y square into b. That's why I kept this b and rho outside, because I know it is going to cancel out. So we are going to have an expression which looks like gy delta y plus, I'm just simplifying it. You can quickly do the math. It's not something special, but I did it as my homework. That the final expression is going to look like something like GC delta V. This is a small homework for you, that for the submission you will submit at 11:30. That make sure that this derivation is something that you are going to get. So again, after taking out certain terms on one side, for example, I can clearly write that G into 1 plus delta y upon 2y into delta y is equal to c square delta v. I want to get rid of this delta v. Do you remember from mass continuity, I derived this expression for delta v as c delta y plus delta y. I will bring it here and I will say that this becomes g into 1 plus delta y 2y delta y is equal to c square delta y upon y plus delta y. Ultimately, I'm interested in the expression of c square. So I can write my c square as gy into 1 plus delta y upon 2y into 1 plus delta y upon y. Now, if my change in height that this ripple is producing is so small, and that really happens in the real world, you create some disturbance in the pond, that ripple sometimes is just a minor height, right? Especially when we are talking about shallow flows. This is always going to have, as I mentioned, even in case of hydrology, we are not going to deal with oceans here, right? We are dealing with shallow flows where depth of flow is not approaching infinity. In that case, we can easily write this c square as gy, assuming that delta y upon 2y is approximately equal to 0 and delta y is much smaller in comparison to y. No issues here. Can I write that my c is equal to root of gy? Does it make sense? Is it the same expression that you derived or used basically to answer that question? Right? The good thing here is that, as I said, that although you may, some of you were applying those Newton's third law of motion or second law of equation, something like that. But I said that here you are dealing in two different dimensions basically. Here there is an element of depth and here is an element of propagation. So derivation is not going to be just simple outcome of v square minus u square equal to 2as or something like that. That's what I meant there. Does it close the loop? Now, derivation is one thing, right? The reason I give this derivations to you is not that I want you to cram or remember the derivations, so that you know why this is coming, how this is coming, so that tomorrow when you go for higher studies, you know this is what I have to refer to if I have to talk about waves, right? But ultimately, as an engineer, we are interested in this expression, c equal to root gy. And we call this c as wave celerity. So this is a name that you will encounter often when somebody is talking about wave propagation velocity, and we call it as a celerity. Now here is something interesting. There are only three cases possible that there is a fluid which is flowing at velocity v. Right now we assume that everything was at standstill because that was not going to change any of our derivation. Now let us say that the fluid was already moving at velocity v and then you threw a stone there. Is it possible? It is possible, right? Nobody is stopping you to throw a stone in a flowing river. Even that is going to produce a wave velocity of c, celerity will be produced, and same derivation can be applied there. You can have this v and v at outfall, and because they will ultimately cancel out, because ultimately they would be the common terms everywhere, right? Now my question to you is, there are only three cases possible that your wave velocity c travels at the same velocity as v. Your c wave velocity on surface is less than the flow velocity, and your c is equal to v. Oh, sorry, c is greater than v. Make sense? Is there any third possibility? है तो बता दो, किसी imaginary space में confuse करना है हमें तो. Okay, if you agree with me, let's go forward. So c equal to v, c less than v, c greater than v. When our friend Rahul was throwing stones into Basan Pond, which category do you think we were in? You can speak, right? Out of these three velocities, in which category do you think we were in?
C greater than V.
Yeah, you clearly saw that pond was not moving. So velocity was nearly zero, but wave was moving, right? So we can say some poetry here. This is pond in the stone. Okay. This is that case, pond in the stone case. V C greater than V. Make sense? Can I say that root of gy greater than V? I hope I have not lost you. सही है ना? Root of gy greater than V. Can I say that V upon root gy less than 1? No? Can I say that? Can I say that Froude number less than 1? Can I say that this has to be subcritical flow? Can I say that my flow is slow? And flow was indeed slow, Rahul, right? Pond was not moving, only stone and waves were moving. That is the beauty of Froude number. Every time you start from anywhere, Froude number will come in. And you know, I have not brought Froude number explicitly. I derived it in front of you. I just didn't say that Froude number greater than 1 equal to 1 less than 1. Right? And that indeed tells that how beautifully these mathematical relationships, equations are knit into engineering. You start from anywhere, at the end, physics will come in and ultimately take you towards the same answer. Does it make sense? Similarly, for this case, can I say that root gy equal to v, v upon root gy, this is equal to 1. And of course, this is Froude number equal to 1. That would mean it's neither supercritical, not subcritical, it's critical. And we are going to have a lot of fun with critical flow because that's the title of our module, critical flows. And this is the most special flow that we can produce. In this case, root gy has to be less than v. Velocity by root gy is greater than 1. And we say that our Froude number is greater than 1. It is supercritical or it is fast flow. So far, so good. Very clearly understood all these things. Now let us again go back to the pond. So we have some pond here. And we have some guy standing here, smiling. This is lineman throwing a stone here. Now let us go back to that physical system. If this stone is thrown here, ripples will be produced in all directions. It doesn't care where your x direction or y direction. It will be produced in this direction as well as it will be produced in this direction. And it will have the celerity c, which is depth dependent root gy. Initial ripple doesn't even care what is the speed of flow of the river, right? That's what we have derived, right? Now, if this river is flowing with the velocity v, so let us say that it is flowing in the direction, in any direction with velocity v. Can I say that if the flow velocity is v here in positive x direction, the resultant velocity is going to be c plus v? C was the velocity, v is what this wave would carry it forward. So the total velocity would be c plus v. Here, total velocity is going to be v minus c. So far, so good. Right? So relative velocity of that particular wave with respect to fluid, we can easily say that, I mean, in one direction it would be additive. So this was C. C was just looking at the propagation of wave, but now we have to look in the context of media also. If media is also flowing with velocity v, right? So we can clearly say that yes, if this is C, this entire system is moving with velocity V. So for an outsider, this would appear as if it is moving with velocity C plus V. That's what I meant to say. So far, so good. Now, what happens when our flow is fast? This should be C minus V. This should be C minus V. In this direction, this is just direction. This is the magnitude, C minus V or V minus C. When our flow is fast, we just learned that our flow velocity V is going to be greater than C. This is the fast condition, as in waterfall conditions. What that would mean is that now our wave will have, of course, C plus root gy velocity here, and it will also, V plus root gy velocity here, and it will also have V minus root gy velocity here. That it will not let it travel upstream, because that resultant of V and C, when it will act together, it will make that wave even travel downwards, because flow velocity is dominating the wave velocity. That is why you would never see a ripple traveling upstream in a waterfall. Ultimately, it's a wave that is propagating on a surface. Your flow is so fast that it is not letting wave to propagate upwards. It will just take it, but of course with the reduced velocity. And downstream, it will travel freely. Does it make physical sense? When this is called as the conditions of fast flow. What will happen in slow flow? In slow flow, you would have V plus C here, and you will have velocity in magnitude equal to V minus C here in that direction. Because velocity of flow is less in comparison to wave velocity, right? So wave is traveling upwards at 20, flow is coming downwards at 10. So still wave would be able to travel at 10 meter per second in upward direction. And downward, it would be 30, basically 10 plus 20 equal to 30, as simple as that. Trains moving in same direction, trains moving in different directions. So what does that mean? It means that in either case, some of the disturbance that we have produced here is going to have some upstream and downstream effects, right? So if you throw a stone here in a slow flow, it will propagate upwards and it could disturb a lot of things upstream. It will definitely disturb everything downstream and as well as upstream. Here also it results in some changes in velocity upstream as soon as the disturbance is created, right? And of course downstream we are always going to have C plus V. This is between slow and fast flow. What happens in the critical flow? In critical flow, you throw a stone, C here, C here. Net resultant here would be V minus C. Here we will have V plus C. For critical flow, V is equal to C. C is equal to root gy. That would mean that it will only have the resultant component in downward direction, which is of magnitude 2c, because velocity is equal to c or c is equal to v, and upward it would be 0. What does that mean? That when your flow is critical, you produce a disturbance, nothing will happen upstream. Only downstream would know that you have thrown a stone. What does that mean for engineering? I have a Havda river. I want to restrict its width of flow. I want to add some soil here, some soil here. Right? Whenever I reduce the width, if you look at these relationships that I drew between Q and Y for given specific energy, because there is no change in bed is horizontal, right? This is my plan. I'm watching this river from the top. My bed is horizontal. There is no friction. That means there is nothing for specific energy to lose. So when specific energy is constant, I should use the relationship between Q and Y, not E and Y, because I want to go along one specific energy and see what is happening. Right? So what will happen is that as I keep on restricting the width of my river, same discharge has to pass. Capital Q is same. So that means small q has to increase, right? So small q will increase. Small q will increase if, let us say that our initial depth of flow was small y. That would mean that it will increase. It will also want to increase further, but it cannot, because for that specific energy, the maximum discharge you can have is this much. We'll do a numerical on that and thing will become crystal clear what I meant to say here. But ultimately, we cannot cross the critical paths. We will stop wherever we see critical path, because ultimately, if you have to decrease the width beyond a point, your specific energy will, your Q has to increase monotonically, because specific discharge will keep on increasing if width is reducing. But this is not possible for this physically constrained setup. This is the locus. For a given E, you cannot leave this trajectory. If you have to leave it, you have to have a higher specific energy. How higher specific energy will come? Your upstream conditions have to change.